Hey, all right. Thank you all for joining us for the this iteration of the Community Policing Ad Hoc. It is October 4th. It is 6:04 p.m. And thank you, Lieutenant Toribio, who just put up some of our most recent changes to the document. Before we sort of get through or start going through some of the changes that might have happened between this past meeting and this meeting, I thought I might start us off with a question, sort of a broader question, which is kind of maybe could generate lots of responses, but we'll see. I think last time I asked, where do we hope that community policing will be in 5 years? I think the question for today's purposes might be, do you think that OPD is adequately resourcing the community policing program? And if not, then what needs to happen and what should change? Lieutenant Febble.
Good evening, everyone. That's a great question. So just briefly, I think the department is staffing it to the best of its ability in accordance to its overall staffing. It's no secret that we're experiencing tremendous challenges in our agency on many levels, violent street crime, property crime, and we also have to balance the crucial need for community engagement continuously. I would say it's just a wish, it's an ideal that it would be a focused priority that as staffing increases, hopefully over the next few years when we get through a financial crisis, that the CROs will be a priority in that. We have seen recent increase in our foot patrols, and they are a very effective model in reducing property crime. And I also believe too that they're actually an excellent community resource. But the community resource officers themselves serve a very specific function, trying to serve many issues across the city, not simply just policing issues that can be addressed by patrol, but many additional. And it would be great if they do not get lost in the shuffle as our staffing hopefully increases in the future.
Thank you, Lieutenant Febble. Yes, we absolutely need to recognize the realities of the moment. I absolutely understand that, and sort of hope that things will get better. Mr. Farmer.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, I respect the fact that OPD is doing, like Lieutenant Febble said, what they can with what they have. But just to answer the question, if you just go off the evaluations that OPD has had through the Measure Z funds, as I was saying a couple meetings ago, CRO projects only equate to about 24% of their hours that they spent overall. So I don't think that they're doing what should be done in accordance with what they agreed to do via the Measure Z ordinance. So that's just going off their own personal evaluations and how they communicate the effectiveness of that geographical policing strategy to their own consultants that put this information in the evaluation. So that's how I would answer that question.
Can I ask, the second part of the question is sort of how do we get to supporting it or having it resourced or sort of changing that particular piece?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me personally, I mean, definitely you can't just keep doing the same things that have always been done and come up with the same reasons why things haven't gotten done, over and over. I think maybe just thinking outside the box, and as Lieutenant Febble said, as they get more staffing, maybe a bigger commitment, at least within the policy, committing to actually, doing apparently Urban Strategies, who is doing the current evaluation. It was communicated to them that over the past year, maybe 2 years, and I believe we covered this a little bit a couple meetings ago, that CRO activities, actually the number has gone up despite the staffing issues. So whatever they've done to accomplish that, maybe more of that. But I don't know without, I don't work at OPD. I'm not a police officer, so I wouldn't know exactly what they've done to change things for the better. It sounds like they've changed things for the better. So I was saying do more of that.
Fair point. Thank you. And I'll just thank you, Pastor Jackie, for joining us just to bring you up to speed. I honestly don't remember the question I asked to start us off. I think it was, do you think that OPD, the CRO program, is adequately resourced? And if not, what can we do to change that? Something along those lines.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for bringing me up to date. Appreciate that.
Yep, of course. Others, thoughts, opinions?
I would tend to agree with both Mr. Farmer and Lieutenant Febble. If you don't have the resource, if you don't have the staffing, then you can't have full deployment of CROs for every beat. And hopefully that will be the priority as the staffing level goes up. I know it's not in the police department anymore, but I would like to see, or I would suggest, staffing up neighborhood service coordinators to begin to do organizing for the neighborhood councils for that eventuality of having their own CRO, and just getting them familiar with the SARA process and just how community policing is supposed to be according to this general order. So I would want to see more NSCs, and I think it was a great idea to put them in the city manager's office.
Thank you. Much appreciated. I will take a moment to say that, as we've been working through this particular policy, I've been watching as the numbers on the CROs are going down and dwindling, and things being taken away from them. The first CRTs and the neighborhood service coordinators, not necessarily taken away as much as shifted to some other portion or prioritized in some other way. And I do think that is tending towards an under-resourcing, but I think the department is figuring out other ways to access those resources. I'm also seeing a dwindling of the number of CROs, and even if I don't know if 24% is a good number or a bad number, or what if anything that represents, but if they're spending 24% of their time on projects, then perhaps having more CROs will mean more projects are being done, as one solution to that. So community resource officers as being that example of what we want, and that shining example of community policing and their interactions with the community. I do hope that the department continues its commitment, its stated commitment, and its demonstrated commitment to this particular program. And I hope that comes through in this policy.
Not to distract from the conversation, but is there a larger font, Lieutenant Toribio, a senior citizen font? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other thoughts before we perhaps turn to some of the changes over our last few meetings?
Commissioner, can you tell me the portion that is in question? Is this the highlighted piece in red?
No, this is just an overall question to sort of center us. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just take a beat, give others an opportunity to formulate their thoughts if they want to add anything.
I just want to add something really quickly.
Yeah.
I think it would be a really good idea for OPD to reflect back on the past 9 years and the percentage of time that CROs have spent on CRO activities, and kind of look ahead, since they have these 7 academies coming up over the next several years, and think about what they can commit to. Because originally, when we talked a couple meetings ago, and I was talking about, hey, why not put in a percentage of time we can commit to in the policy? they said that they tried that back when it was Measure Y, and that they originally started with 80%. So I guess obviously that didn't work out. So try and think, what you think you can commit to, and put that out there, because the new version of Measure Z is kind of in progress. So, and we want to get it right, because there's a lot of funds being spent on this, taxpayer dollars being spent on this geographical policing strategy, and we obviously all want it to work. So we want it to be realistic. We want to be able to communicate that to the community and not have it look like, well, they said they were doing one thing, but they did something else.
Yeah, Toribio here, if I can. I've been thinking about this question the entire time, and there's no, I don't know. I think if I had a solution, then I probably would be much more than a lowly lieutenant. But I think staffing is just part of it. So I mean, let's say that right now we were to pull officers from other divisions and staffed every single CP beat for CRO. So we had an officer for 31 X-ray, 31 yellow, 31 zebra, and we had every single CRO position filled. I think that's only part of it, because staffing is not just a CRO problem. It's like a department-wide problem. And one of the issues I know that's been discussed across several of these meetings has been the allocation of the CROs. So staffing, we could be full as well, but I don't quite know how you avoid tapping into a resource, be it CRO, be it CRT, to helping when there's something critical going on. I experienced this. I helped Captain Caney in Area 5. I administratively fall under Area 5. Assist with staffing violence suppression units. So there are designated sectors in Area 5 where we look to send officers conducting high visibility patrol. And the directive there is, don't leave that sector. Unless there's something really crazy going on, don't leave that sector, because we're assigning you specifically to be there, to conduct stops there, or to be a visual deterrent to areas where there's high crime. But what ends up happening is, there'll be some crazy critical incident, and it's really hard, either as a watch commander or as a district sergeant, and even as the officer working that assignment, to kind of sit there if they're conducting high visibility when officers need help because there's some barricaded suspect or something like that, right? So even if we staffed, I think, CROs fully, I think the other half of it is, how are we able to allow them to primarily do what they're designed. Sorry, I don't know where I cut off.
Even if it's fully staffed, how do we make sure that they do what they are designed for?
Yeah, so that's, and I don't have an answer for that, because it's a hard thing to do. I understand that the neighborhood council priorities and their own projects, that's their primary responsibility. But these exigencies that come up, it's really hard. It's hard for maybe a CRO who's at their desk, because they're having to send a bunch of emails out to, let's say, city for code enforcement or something, because that's part of their project. And like, I need to sit here and I need to hammer out these emails or make these phone calls to talk to the city inspector or do XYZ. And now there's, a shooting suspect, and they're asking for officers to help. It gets tough, so I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but I see that as a problem beyond staffing.
Appreciate the insight. It's a reality. Sort of, we're asking officers to both do their assigned duties, but also respond to and deal with emergencies and violent crime as best they are able to in a collective organization. Hello, Jose. Catching you up. We're just having a small discussion about whether sort of a grounding question for us today, whether you think that the CRO program is adequately resourced, and if not, what can be done to change that?
Is that a question to me?
It can be. You can take it or
Okay.
pass.
Well, as always, I think that the CROs are the key to reducing crime and raising our quality of life, and whatever it takes to get them back in their beats. And on a practical level, it certainly can be, gradually, but I think they need to go back to doing what they're trained to do, and that is focused on the problems in their respective assigned beats. And if that means that they need to be recruited from, I guess that's the word, patrol, then that's what needs to happen. But again, I go back to there's never been any resolution of the question of the deployment of officers to out of 911 to nonviolent and non-criminal calls. That was documented a couple years ago by ex-DC Chris Bolton and David Muhammad. So that report, it seems, just got buried. But the essential question is deployment. How is it that those officers are being sent to nonviolent, non-criminal calls? And certainly, if they're doing that, then there seems to me to be adequate staffing so that the CROs can go back to their beats and do that critical work in the beats. So that's my answer to that question.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we head on into it? All right. Why don't Lieutenant Turbio take us through?
All right. So the bulk of the time at the last meeting, it was spent discussing the number of projects that a CRO has, what happens if they're assigned multiple beats, and then one of the questions that was asked. I'll get to the section, and then I'll jump to where I think we have it resolved thanks to Commissioner Shea. So question that was asked, it was for this section here, and it was, hey, look, can we have beat and project and priority kind of fully defined? So it's in a prior section, but they're all kind of defined, and Commissioner Shea had included in his email that he sent out that everybody should have got, but if you didn't, I put the information inside here where we have these definitions. And then he also had suggested text for this section here, which was the main point of discussion last time. So let's go quickly to, not quickly, but let's go first to the definitions. So we scroll up to here, we have priorities and SARA projects and a section elsewhere for beats. But let's go to first to SARA projects. So what was suggested from Commissioner Shea was a sentence to kick off this section that just says, a neighborhood council priority elevated by a community resource officer to be taken through the SARA process is called the SARA project or project. And then this was the standing text that was here under SARA projects, and it talks about SARA being SARA project. It's the method by which problems are identified, and then there are tailored solutions that are designed for it, and then reference to an appendix that details all of the SARA model steps, the scanning, the analyzing the response, and the assessment. So this, sorry about that. So this is the text that was added to help clarify the definition of a project. I'll give you guys a second to take a look at it. And then I just inserted one comment to discuss, and that is with this added text, does this now limit, or what does it do to SARA projects that a CRO creates that is not a neighborhood council priority? So maybe they have something that is relevant to the beat, but isn't a council priority, but maybe it's a priority, either a directive from command or from a different source in the city, or a self-identified priority that the CRO creates a SARA project for. And does this need to be reworded to kind of be more inclusive for those types of SARA projects?
You bring up a good point, because later on we talk about how the policy states that a CRO must have at least one open project per beat focused on a neighborhood council priority. That kind of does necessarily suggest that there are other projects that are not centered on a neighborhood council priority.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes sense to maybe change that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
A neighborhood council priority, or I don't know what the terminology is, some other process or some other priority, or other priority brought up by law enforcement priority, perhaps. I don't know what the phrase is. I think you would know better. I also wonder how often that happens.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know Lieutenant Feppel's kind of been out of the game for a while. So, and I think that Sergeant Mangai's tied up and unavailable. But Feppel, do you have any insight into how often non-neighborhood council priorities, non-neighborhood council priority SARA projects there are, or how often they happen?
Yeah, so good question. It's good that we bring this up for conversation. So it actually would happen rather frequently, which is why it ended up in the language of Measure Z. That there was a time where particularly proactive CROs would identify issues on the beat, and they would want to get additional resources to deal with those issues. But that issue was not necessarily the top issue of the NC. I saw it very frequently. And so, and for the most part, the department did a pretty good job of, the CRO supervisors pushing their people towards making a priority one of the projects, because that's what was outlined. But I will say it was very easy throughout my tenure as a CRO to see 4 or 5 different major issues on my beat and that you want to deal with, but you only have so much time in the day and so many resources. And they weren't necessarily what the community saw as their priority. But in becoming a CRO, that you're working for the community. So while I was a CRO and while I was a CRO supervisor, we had strict adherence to you would always have the community's project open first, and then secondarily you could pick one outside of that if you had the bandwidth.
Okay. So let me get with you and or Sergeant Mangai to, assuming that the ad hoc is in agreement that this modification here is a good adjustment to make to Commissioner Shea's text. So essentially, again, just to sum it up, we're defining Sarah projects here, and defining it as a neighborhood council priority that's elevated to be taken through the Sarah process, or another, for a temporary phrase, a law enforcement priority that would elevate to the establishment of putting something through the Sarah process.
So I'm of the opinion, and some people may have a different opinion. I'm of the opinion, having done this for over a decade now, that is extremely well written. And the reason why is because for the first time, it's very clearly defined the difference between a project and a priority. And it's nice to see that there's diction that states that the project is taken from a priority, and it creates that significant delineation. Because we've discussed many times on this ad hoc is that the number one challenge I have when I speak with NCs or throughout the process is just the word priority alone sounds like it's the priority. That's what it means, right? But the project is actually a much bigger lift that the CRO is required to accomplish, or at least attempt to accomplish through the Sarah process, certain tasks. Priorities are secondary to the project, and those are our best wishes that we hope to get to. And I think the way that you've worded it, Steve, does a really good job of indoctrinating those differences.
So I think that this may be it. And if you guys want to take a moment to look right above it, it was right in front of my face. There's the definition of community priorities, and it talks about how it can come from different sources. So I think that if we simply recall with the definition above, adding it's also a neighborhood council priority, that this should cover what we're looking for here. If you guys want to take a second and look.
Do you want to leave yourself open some situation that isn't generated by the community?
I was looking at, I'm sorry, Febo,
No,
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I was kind of looking at this as being kind of open. And even if it's like, let's say, something that that the deputy chief of the area wants addressed based on conversations they had with somebody, it would still technically be a community priority. I'm trying to think of something, of any project that wouldn't kind of fall under categorically of it being like a community based project, unless it was something like completely internal, just with like interdepartment. But I don't see that happening or turning into a Sarah project. It would have something that would have some type of effect outside.
I think that well, let me first ask to see if anyone else has any opinions. Maybe right now, that's good. Take it back to the department, make sure you're covering all your bases, bring it back.
Okay. Just one sec, I'm in a meeting, sorry.
Jose?
Yeah, the one thing I want, and I would have to go back over the language to come up with anything specific, but I want it to be clear that the neighborhood council, once it's gone through the process of determining what is a priority, that they then write up following SPART principles. It then is given to the CRO to take through the Sarah process. What I want it clarified is that it's a question of the neighborhood council determining what is a priority, and the CRO is obligated to, as Lieutenant Febble said, take the community's concerns in terms of a priority into the Sarah project process. So what I don't want is that we have a neighbor council that goes through the process of determining what's a priority and then writing it up in SMART principle, gives it to the CRO, and CRO says, no, this isn't serious enough, or this isn't this, or this isn't that. And does not, and decides on their own, the CRO, to not take it on as a SARA project.
Lieutenant Febble?
That's a great point that Mr. Dorado brings up. And I believe the policy does cover it. The important thing for everybody to know in this meeting is that, yeah, definitely projects minimally one should be derived from a community priority, so long as they meet the criteria for a project, which is the SMART system. You know, it has to be specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and timely. And sometimes it's very difficult to meet all those needs. Or in other times, for example, it may not even be in our wheelhouse anymore. Like one of the most frequent projects people will request is, we want to get rid of all the abandoned autos in a particular area, but that's no longer our jurisdiction. It's Department of Transportation. So agreed, as long as it's within the purview of SMART and also within the purview of the agency.
Mr. Dorado?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. If it's not in the purview of OPD, certainly it should not be their job to do. That's not to say that they can't refer a job over to. I'll give you an example. We have a burned out house in 28X, and we wrote it up according to SMART principles, and the CRO, our CRO, correctly said, well, that's not within the parameter of a SARA project, because that's the responsibility of Public Works and City Attorney, etc. And that was my response to him. Yes, you're correct. And so, but that's not to say that he did not and should not make the call over to the city attorneys or the Public Works and rattle their cage in order to get some movement on this particular issue. So while I agree with Lieutenant Febble, I think that's not to preclude the CRO taking a proactive step to refer something that's not within their wheelhouse to a specific city department that does have a responsibility to address an issue like that. Thank you.
I think I heard agreement. Lieutenant Febble, did you want to add more?
Yeah, just one other thing. So one of the, I would say, evolutions of the NCs that I've seen over the years, which is actually kind of neat, is they are more frequently making their priorities at the NC non-police issues, and such as dealing with unhoused encampments, or again, towing of vehicles or things of that nature. They're more actively embracing. When I first started, everything was a police issue. And to Mr. Dorado's point, we can actually open up a project on anything that the community wants, even if, say, it's not in police purview. If the community understands that the goal, because they all have a goal, is stated as such that the police will be a facilitator or a mediator, or a resource director, and they could put, hey, that they'll be a resource director for 6 months or a year to try and deal with X issue. There's nothing that says that we can't do that, so long as that's the public's desire and they understand the limitations of the agency in whatever project that they choose. It doesn't, and essentially what I'm saying is, it doesn't 100% have to meet the SMART process, but the community has to agree that they may not get the actual, the PD is not going to be the spear on every little issue within that process.
Mr. Farmer. Should I say Commissioner Farmer? Sorry.
One's fine. Thank you. Hey, my video, my phone died, so I had to switch my laptop. My video is not working on here. Sorry. But Lieutenant Febble, I'm just curious, how come the department doesn't push back on the neighborhood council folks when it's something that's not within the police's purview. Why don't you guys just push back and say, hey, that's not in our purview. We don't do that. Such and such department does that, and leave it at that. And then just focus your resources on what's within your purview.
Well, then that's a great question. And we try and respectfully inform the community about our limitations, and then hopefully they can make more informed decisions. And I also think that the NSCs play a critical role in that. They will often like step in the middle of a meeting and say, hey, you know, that's actually code enforcement, or that's DOT. They're the ones that deal with that. DOT is a frequent one. But to Mr. Dorado's point as well, sometimes folks, they're just like, this is our number one problem. Like we are just, tired of the speeding down Gulf Links Road. So OPD, we wanted you to open a project, but on the whole roadway, and please help us work with DOT. You may have to do a little bit of traffic enforcement. That'll be your job, but please liaison with us with DOT and other entities to help fix it. But also to your point, sir, is that OPD needs to be smart and focus on criminal and property crimes and, community issues that are in our purview. And we should be delegating that to the NSC. And that's hopefully what the policy will reflect, is that the CRO should be delegating things outside of the police's purview to the relative entities that fix it, so we don't get bogged down with things that we're not supposed to be doing or we're not good at doing.
Last word, Mr. Dorado, so that we can keep going.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the question of, well, why doesn't OPD push back? My example of our CRO pushing back on our project, I should say our priority around the burned out house, is an example of how that is happening. And he was correct, and that was my response to him. That you're right. That's not within the OPD's purview, and it should not be a Sarah project. That should not be a priority of ours. And the other part of it is that talking about the evolution that Lieutenant Pebble brought up, I think it's a question, and this is part of the evolution. I think it's a question of the neighborhood councils becoming more educated about the different departments within the city and what their responsibilities are. And as that continues, which is what I expect, there'll be, I think, less effort given to putting over a priority to something that really isn't within the purview of OPD, and that's a good thing. I think the more that the neighborhood councils are educated about what the different services are, different departments, et cetera, what the different responsibilities are of the different staff members in the city as a whole, the smoother this whole process is going to go. So thank you.
Mr. Nesperos, and then let's move on.
Thank you. This conversation, I think, reflects back to an earlier statement on the importance of the NSCs and the power they have in the city manager's office, and that they should be the ones doing the coordinating. They should be the ones doing the educating, and it shouldn't be on the CRO. I think he's an adjunct and an accessory, but the primary responsibility for this type of information passing, education, should be on the neighborhood service coordinators. I mean, it's even in their name. And I'm just wondering, since they're no longer in the police department, how much direction can you give them in a general order of the police department?
I think if Mr. DeVries was here, he would say very little.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. It's a great question, and there's a reason why they actually did separate them. The fortunate part is that they're very responsive. Unfortunately, we lost Ms. Judith Christopher. She was exceptional, but they really are, throughout my experience, have been very responsive. But yes, they answer to a different authority. And so they're a partner, and we can only suggest to them as just they suggest to us.
Well, that OPD suggestion can be enhanced by and reinforced by a suggestion from the commission as well.
You and I will take that up outside of this meeting. Lieutenant Toribio, let's move on.
Got it. I just wanted to address a couple comments that came in the chat. One was about the false alarm registration fee program, and unfortunately, I'm not very well educated on the ins and outs of that, but I did write it down to present to people who may know better, and then next time hopefully I'll have an update. And then somebody else asked about priorities. I responded that it was on the screen, and that the priorities come from different places, including the neighborhood councils. So if anybody has questions on that, I'll be checking the chat. Okay. I think that Commissioner Shea in his email included verbiage that clears up a whole lot of maybe ambiguity regarding a beat or a CP beat. The sentiment, I think, is spot on. I just have to check to ensure that the verbiage is consistent with how we refer to kind of like the subdivision beats. So, when we mention beat, what exactly are we referring to? So this is to be a footnote inserted, and this is the text that was submitted by Commissioner Shea. I'll just summarize and paraphrase. Essentially, it's saying that there are 35 beats, but each beat has different subdivisions, or potentially has multiple subdivisions. He gives an example of the X, Y, and Z beats for beat 31. And the kind of the definitive thing here is the last sentence, which says that community resource officers, they're assigned to beats by their numbers, not by their letters, and that beat refers to the entire territory, including the subdivisions. So hopefully having this verbiage present in a footnote clears up what is this policy referring to when it says a beat, and when we say a CRO is assigned to a beat, what exactly that means. So I'll give you guys a second to look this up or look this over, and then we'll go to the section regarding the project assignments per beat. And with this as the context, hopefully the verbiage makes sense to folks. So I think that if I'm not mistaken, the subdivisions, and I don't know where this is in policy, but I just think the nomenclature or the verbiage that's used, or they're called community policing beats. So a community policing beat would have the letter designation. So I'll just check and make sure if it's listed anywhere that we're just using consistent verbiage, and I'll incorporate that into here if everybody else is okay with this footnote being inserted.
To catch people up, the reason why we had this is because of what we're going to see next, which is having a project open on a neighborhood council priority per beat. If beat refers to the subdivisions, then that could be anywhere between 6 to 8 open projects for a CRO at a given time, which we are hearing is unworkable, which I believe. Just taking it at its face value. So this definition was required to clarify that.
I don't see any hands, but I think I'm seeing everybody. Okay, so you guys just stop me if you'd like to go back to this. So if we go down, this is the main point here, point E, where we were discussing quite a bit over previous meetings regarding the maintenance of projects and those associated to neighborhood council priorities per beat. So if you look at the red text here, I'll make it a little bit bigger so folks can see. This was in the commissioner's email as the suggested text for this point here. And so I'll just read it because it's pretty important, and we were it's been the focus of much of the discussion. So the requirement that a community resource officer have at least one open project centered on a neighborhood council priority per assigned beat refers to the beats assigned, not the individual subdivisions. Thus, if a community resource officer is assigned to beat 31 and beat 32, they are required to have at least two open projects centered on a neighborhood council priority, one for beat 31 and one for beat 32. So I think the verbiage, it's written in an unambiguous kind of way. It's easy to see what the requirement is for projects centering on an NC priority. One, are folks okay with the clarity of the verbiage? And two, are they okay with the content of the statement or the subpoint?
Lieutenant Febble, I know what you're going to say. I'm just going to give people a moment to sort of let it process. All right, Lieutenant Febble.
Okay, yeah, this will definitely come as no surprise. I absolutely think it's ideal. It's just not attainable. The number, there has to be a carve out based on the staffing of our agency, and it's such a bummer to keep talking about staffing because I feel like Lieutenant Toribio and I have talked about this our entire careers. You know, and you're always hopeful, but it doesn't seem to get to the point where we want it, and we can't have CROs not fulfilling their commitments to the community. If they accept a project, that's bad for everybody's reputation and the service that they deserve. But we also can't have them being a violation of policy and subject to discipline for something they simply can't do.
Jose, Mr. Dorado.
Yeah, so if there is 3 beats that have 2 subdivisions apiece, that's obviously 6 beats, including and counting the subdivisions. But if I'm understanding this language correctly, it's only a open project per beat, ignoring the individual subdivisions. So if it's beat 31, 32, 33, and each one of those has subdivisions, 31X, 31Y, etc., the CRO would only be responsible for 3 open projects, not 6.
As a floor, yes.
Yes, as it relates to a neighborhood council priority. So they would be required to have one per whole beat that is focused or determined as a neighborhood council priority.
Right. So I could see that. Let's just give it an example. You got 31 X and Y. Then there'll have to be some discussion between the 2 neighborhood councils, 31X, 31Y, as to what should be the project, the open project that covers their beat, 31. So that's something that'll have to be worked out between, that I see, the 2 neighborhood councils. But in terms of the capacity for the CRO, I don't see that they could not handle an open project per beat, ignoring again the individual subdivisions. Like in my example, instead of 6, it'd be 3, 31, 32, 33. So unless I'm missing something, I don't see that as being unworkable.
It's definitely written to be workable. There is inherent tension, right? There's inherent tension that comes with this floor of project requirements. One is that, well, it kind of has this tension between subdivisions, especially if there is a more prominent problem identified by a neighborhood council in one subdivision versus another. And then CRO is in the unfortunate position of having to choose which of the ones to do. And there will be this push and pull of, well, what about this project and this priority? I think that comes down to the relationship between the CRO and the subdivisions and the NCPs and the NCs to sort of work and have a balanced workload across and priority system across all of the subdivisions that they may staff and handle. But also it allows for sort of a little bit of creativity in thinking what is a project that might satisfy all of the beats and is impactful, or the entire beat and is impactful if a CRO so chooses. So it's going to be, there's going to need to be a lot of discussion about it, frankly, and it's a solution to this language, maintaining that requirement that at least there's one project centered on a neighborhood council priority per assigned beat, which we are hearing it's happening. I believe that it's happening, that it's generally, or most of the time, being the neighborhood council priority, but having it written into policy in a way that shows its focus on those neighborhood council priorities. Lieutenant Febble or Mr. Dorado, is that a new hand or different?
Mine's a new hand. Go ahead with Lieutenant Febble.
My suggestion would be we could up the ante a little bit, but still provide relieve in the sense that the CRO is not going to be in fear of violating the policy if we say that every CRO, because the CRO could have multiple beats, right? Heaven forbid staffing gets cut more, that every CRO should have at least 2 open projects based on community priorities. And then that absolves a bit of the bicker if one NC files a complaint that the CRO is picking one over the other. And it also provides a very clear, that regardless of how many beats, you're still going to have 2 projects open at any given time minimum. And, that's a tall lift in and of itself, but I think that's more reasonable.
Will you say that one more time?
Yeah, just in simple terms, sir, instead of putting the basis on the number of beats of projects being open, put the basis of the number of projects being open on each CRO, that each CRO shall have a minimum of 2 projects open based on a community priority at any given time. And now I'm a police officer, not a mathematician, that's why I got this job. But if we actually get the full staffing, that technically is a higher requirement than Measure Z even had for CROs, where they were only required to have 1 open at any given time. So in the long run, writing it this way is a win.
Why wouldn't we just do both?
The challenge is that when you get to a point where, like in 2021, when I only had 4 CROs covering all of East Oakland, there's no way they could meet the per beat. Even if it was just per beat, then the CRO would have like 5 or 6 projects, which is not remotely tenable. I think at one point in time, I had 3 open, and it was very challenging.
My problem with that is it allows OPD to drop the number of CROs.
Agreed. That's something that maybe we could think of a carve out for.
Mr. Dorado.
Yes, I think, with all due respect, I think the lieutenant's suggestion is not workable, because what you have, if you have a CRO only having to have 2 open projects, then you increase the competition between the neighborhood councils. And let's just take my example of the 31, 32, 33. Just my hypothetical example that each one has a subdivision, 31X, 31Y, etc. So you've got 6 potential neighborhood councils vying for two priorities. Because now, instead of there being three, let's say the potential conflict between 31X and 31Y, now you've got all six vying for two. So it increases those potential conflicts. So that's one reason why I wouldn't favor that reduction. Secondly, in my example again of the conflict between 31X and 31Y or any other subdivisions, any other beats, if in fact it came down to a real conflict, that's where the Community Policing Advisory Board should and could legislatively step in to resolve a dispute. And that certainly happened in the past in a number of questions. So if it really got to where you had two neighborhood councils really going at it in terms of who has the more important priority, that's what the CPAV is for. They're stepping in and resolving those kinds of disputes. The other aspect of this is that this whole question of the number of open projects assigned to CROs is a real pressure point that the community can and should really hammer on the chief to see to it that, again, the CROs go back, that CROs are increased and CROs go back to their beats. So you have more CROs that can then lessen the pressure on the existing ones. Certainly, you can't cover all of East Oakland in any real way with 4 CROs. That's just talk about unworkable. So that's on the community to really push hard on the mayor, on the city administrator, on the chief, that CROs need to go back to their beats and point at this question of the numbers of open projects as just one reason why that should be the case. Thanks.
Lieutenant Febel, I don't think you're going to win the day with that particular suggestion.
As long as obviously just we don't put the CRO in an untenable position where they can't comply with policy. And I remember Mr. DeVries, excuse me, being on one of these, and he recognized a couple provisions in the policy where he's just like, the city is going to make certain decisions that the agency is going to have to comply with, and that by default could make the CROs out of policy. And we just want to recognize those and make sure that we don't doctrinate those pitfalls that we simply can't comport to.
Absolutely. I will. I think that we're not going to lose this particular section. I think that most people might be happy to add a floor of 2 on top of the current requirement. I would also say that the department's also pretty well equipped on asking both the commission and the city council to suspend or temporarily suspend particular policies in an event that they are completely unworkable or would cause a great deal of officers to become out of compliance. Specifically, there were some use of force reporting requirements that were suspended temporarily as an emergency measure, I think in 2021. So to the extent I think y'all monitor, and if it becomes unworkable, make a request. I think at the moment it is, we're sort of drafting it around being workable at the moment, right? And with the capacity of CROs having either 2 or 3 beats at the moment.
Okay, so let me just update this. We'll go to the 2, and then we'll present this to our command and see after discussion with them where we're at, and we'll revisit. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, weren't there some CROs with 3 assigned beats?
Yeah.
I don't know what you
All
want
right.
to do with that, but
So I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding what the change was. I thought it was that we were going to say that to have 2 open projects centered on an NC priority per assigned beat. Is that what the edit was, or
One.
1? Okay. So this verbiage as is what we're sticking with for now.
Yes, the only clarification I would make is that at the end is just clarifying that let me see there, quite at least, yeah, that the number of open beats refer to well, I don't know how to.
That's
I don't
above,
know,
refers to the whole
just-
beat
just-
as opposed to the subdivisions.
Yeah, just clarifying that
That's
we're not-
above.
We're not gonna count the subdivisions as an additional beat, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Probably not necessary.
So that's here in this footnote talking about the subdivisions, and then also in section 3E where we're at, it kind of gives like an example. So if CRO is assigned to 31 and 32, they'd have 2 projects versus 5, right? For 31 XYZ and then 32 X and Y.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. The next, just to update you on something, it's not much of an update, but last time it was proposed, well, I brought it up, how about if we kind of put in policy what is like the ideal based on staffing, and then conditions on how those requirements change based on staffing levels. And then it was suggested that, hey, that looks like there's going to be like a lot of command decisions on that. So check with command and then report back. So I pushed out an inquiry, waiting for a response as soon as I hear back. If it's before the next meeting, I'll just push out via email kind of what the response is, so it can be a discussion point. All right, slowly making progress. The next section, which talks about reporting on the progress of NC priorities, Commissioner Shea in his email had some recommendations, and they are reflected here. So the standing verbiage that we had is here, and he recommended we remove the condition that it be done at NC meetings, and instead it's done in the reporting, the progress reports. They're done as determined by the CRO in partnership with the neighborhood council. And then it lists examples on how this stuff may be presented, such as oral reports, written reports, and then this point here on providing the updates on the SARA projects to the NC. So I'll give you guys a second to take a look at this. And then, sorry, that keeps changing as I move my mouse. But so take a look, and then let me know what you guys think. Again, this is CRO requirements on the reporting of neighborhood council priority updates and how that is done. So I know you all are reading, but let me just talk a little bit about what my thinking was. We've been going in circles around this for a while. It's initially it had 2 requirements for CROs, both reporting on the progress of NC priorities at each neighborhood council meeting, to the extent confidentiality and privacy requires, and reporting in real time the progress of SARA projects as they go through each particular step. I think in a written report to be distributed. I recognized kind of the 2 sides of the debate. It's a little bit more poignant with Mr. Farmer bringing up the sort of the
the percentages of how much work is done on a project, fire CROs. On the one hand, CROs, we don't want our CROs to do the work that they're asked to do. That of the many different things that we're asking them to do in this particular policy, and adding additional reporting requirements on them makes it so that they have less time for other things. On the other hand, the communication between the CRO and the neighborhood council and the real-time reporting of those progress updates are, I think, in Mr. Dorado's words, key to the partnership between the neighborhood council and the CRO, and more broadly, the department and the community. This is, frankly, a compromise. And it may end up becoming a series of requirements that are different for each CRO and each neighborhood council to fit with the particular needs, requirements, or asks of each neighborhood council, but essentially ask that the CRO and the neighborhood council have a discussion. How do you want updates? When do you want those updates? In what form do you want those updates? And what do you want those updates about? Which may mean that some CROs end up reporting much more than what other CROs do, depending on which particular neighborhood council they're working with and what they have agreed upon. On the one hand, you may have, and this also, I think, accounts for the situation. I think, Mr. Dorado, you mentioned, there are some neighborhood councils that only meet every 2 months now and would like regular updates outside of those particular meetings. This doesn't create uniformity, which I think the department won't like. This doesn't require written reporting at every stage, which I imagine some members of the community won't like. Frankly, I just tried to make both of y'all unhappy to try to reach a compromise. So, yeah, that's what this is here. I will say that I took out the at neighborhood council meetings up at the top paragraph to sort of and included it in the first bullet point, because that's generally when and how you're making those reports at neighborhood council meetings, making oral reports. The other part of it is I'm realizing, based on our prior discussion, that we may or may not need to broaden or change neighborhood council priority to community priority, but not quite sure about that right now. That's, I think, a smaller point than the ultimate point we're trying to reach here.
I see. Yeah, that could. It is worth discussing, actually. Yeah, just a note.
So,
I see Lieutenant Pebble's hand up.
I'm not sure if it is up new or
Apologies. No, it's not a new one that's up. I think I made my concern on this one rather clear. I very much respect and actually appreciate the community when they tell me exactly what they want reported out on, and sometimes what they don't want reported out on. I've experienced both. It makes our job much easier and allows us to cater to those that we serve. But as you all know as well, that I am very caution based on these real time timelines, as they're potentially putting the CRO in a disciplinary position. That's not tenable based on the amount that they are used for so many different things. So I definitely agree that we should comport with what the community wants. It's the timeline is my concern.
And I've tried to address that in the third bullet point by saying, well, I didn't do quite as good of a job as I thought I did. Maybe on a regular basis or upon the completion of each step of the SARA project. Again, that's going to be a conversation between the CRO and the neighborhood council about what is workable and what is reasonable. Mr. Dorado?
Yeah, two suggestions I would make is that the language, the text here, in a manner determined by the CRO in partnership with the neighborhood council, be switched to in a manner determined by the neighborhood council in partnership with the CRO. And the second thing is I would suggest that these updates be made upon completion of the completion of each step of the SARA process, and not allow the flexibility, if you will, of on a regular basis, because that could mean anything. So I would like to see that that in fact the CROs simply give a report, and again, it doesn't have to be a doctoral dissertation. It can be a couple, 3 sentences as to what they saw in the scan, for example. I don't see that that's a huge amount of time. And the other aspect of this, I think, and specific to the analysis portion of the SARA project, of the SARA process, is that there should be a great deal of interest in the sponsoring neighborhood council of the priority to contribute to this whole process, and specifically around the analysis portion. I would think that the neighborhood council be willing, more than willing, to identify any potential resources that may contribute to the development of the response, which is obviously the third step. So they can, in partnership, I would think, with the CRO, be part and parcel of this whole process, and that's just one example. And that obviously would help the CRO spend more time on other issues in the beat, and it I think would foster it would further a collaboration between the CRO and the neighborhood council, which should start really in the whole deliberation about what is a priority. I think this is just another aspect that would further that partnership. Thank you.
So on your kind of comment kind of goes to 2 parts.
Yes.
And so I'm going to start with the first part and turn to Lieutenant Febel or Lieutenant Toribio about that first part. If we flip the wording of the initial paragraph to say, reporting in a manner determined by the neighborhood council in partnership with the CRO, what are your thoughts about that?
I just think we should add the word should be, in partnership with the neighborhood council, because there are certain things that the NC, and over by and large, I do agree with that. We want them to tell us what information they want and what information they don't want, but we can't give them completely unfettered information, because there's certain criteria that we can't put out to the public. So the word should allows the CRO the flexibility to say, unfortunately, I can't give this information, but I'm very happy to provide what I can provide based along what you want. I think that's best for both parties. Just adding one word.
I think that this is more regarding just not the content of what's delivered, but just the manner. So, like, if it's going to be, at first I thought it was 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, but now I see the distinction here, and I do agree. Actually, like the manner in which the information is delivered, it's probably better determined by the neighborhood council with the partnership or with feedback from the CRO. So that's essentially just saying, hey, we'd like oral reports at our neighborhood council meetings, or we'd like, a written report. But the content, I think, can still be controlled by the CRO, given whatever privacy issues or legal issues kind of come up. So does that kind of make sense, Febel? Or
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Makes sense.
Okay.
To me.
Okay, so then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It sounds like there might be agreement to have that particular line changed to in a manner determined by the neighborhood council in partnership with the CRO, which puts the neighborhood council in the lead of determining how that information comes in, which is goes towards the ideal that Lieutenant Febel described, and the priority by the department. Perhaps we may need a small caveat about, well, I think that I think that CROs are constantly juggling throughout all of these reporting requirements or sort of information sharing, their responsibilities towards privacy and confidentiality. I don't think it needs to be reiterated here, but if anyone else does, happy to put it in. Okay, so I move on to the next part, which is if the department agrees with that part, Jose, Mr. Dorado, sorry,
Yes.
that it's reporting in a manner determined by the neighborhood council in partnership with the CRO, then isn't your second concern kind of alleviated because really it's going to be up to the neighborhood council? Your
Well,
second concern
yeah.
about like how that reporting happens and when it happens and the timing of which it happens. It sounds like it's in a manner determined by the neighborhood council with, of course, sort of in discussion with the CRO and talking about what's reasonable, what's timely, etc.
Well, yeah, you have a point. If in fact it's in a manner determined by the neighborhood council, they can opt to either have the updates on a regular basis or upon the completion of each step of the Sarah project. So yeah, that I think that would follow.
Yeah.
That I think in a manner determined by the neighborhood council covers the option of either one.
And I want to be sensitive to sort of the thought that, our discussion from earlier, which is that, I think our CROs will respectfully tell us, hey, that's maybe outside of our purview, or hey, that might, like cause me to not be able to do any of my other work. And for the neighborhood council to have that discussion, I do want to think about that though. What happens if a neighborhood council turns around and says, hey, we want all three of these? That might be, and what if it's not just one, it's all 5 neighborhood councils for the CRO? What do we do to safeguard that? Or maybe against that? I'm not sure if that is something to be safeguarded against.
Are you talking about when you say the 3, you're talking about the 3 bullet points?
Yes. Because recognize that, these 3 may not be that much to one particular neighborhood council, but our CROs are covering 4 to 6 to 8 neighborhood councils, depending on whether they're assigned to 2 or 3 beats.
Yeah,
and you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't see the that it's an unworkable load. A brief oral report is something that I think would be expected at any neighborhood council meeting. And frankly, I think if in fact there are written reports at each step of the Sarah project, that should be passed on to the beat, the council as a whole. So they're really, in my opinion, that just covers that base. So there's really not a need to have a brief oral report because it's already been reported out.
Well, not everything goes through the project though. Not everything goes through the Sarah process, right? Because there are some priorities that are just worked on, but outside of the Sarah process.
Okay.
And then there are
Yeah.
other community priorities that may not be, yeah. So I get it. Community wants to be informed, sort of wants to be sort of on top of it. I also want to, part of this document is protecting our CRO's time.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that it is protected for purposes of working on projects and serving other law enforcement duties.
Yeah, I think that the verbiage as is, I mean, I think it's hard to maybe have something that safeguards everything. I also maybe I'm kind of seeing it glass half full, where I think that in the partnership between the CRO and the NC, they'll be able to come to an understanding of what the expectations are for reporting. And it's going to, I think this is what's good about this, I think, is that it leaves it for the specific NCs and the CROs to work on that format. So, one NC may like it one way, another may like it a different way. But I mean, I do think that, I don't know, maybe again, I'm just being too optimistic, but I don't anticipate the councils and the CROs not being able to come to an understanding or a decision on how the reporting should be done. Again, though, I'm several years removed from working as a PS or CRO, so.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think it can be worked out. And
Good.
it should be worked out.
I certainly hope so. Want to write a workable policy.
Sure.
Are there other portions of this policy to go over for today?
I don't believe so, but so this is getting really hard for me to follow. So like if I don't do it now, then it's not going to happen. So right after this meeting, I'll go through. I will I'll send you guys a copy of this as is, along with a better formatted one, meaning everything will be approved that we have agreed upon. Anything that's lingering, it will stand out. So I'll do it now, because if I don't do it now, then I'm not gonna do it. There's just stuff piles up, and I dedicated this evening just to this, so I'll do that. Because I imagine if I'm having a hard time, reading stuff, everybody else is probably having a similar issue. So
Is this not the only thing you're working on?
So if there are other points of discussion that need to be made, they should be readily identified in the cleaned document.
I would say, since it's 7:25, let's schedule our next meeting. Everyone take a real good hard look at this policy once Lieutenant Toribio has it sent out. I think there will be a brief command review or a command review of some of the language that we've put in here. And Lieutenant Toribio or Lieutenant Febble will let us know what that command review develops, either before that next meeting or by the next meeting. And if there's a change, what that change might be. And then we'll try to wrap this up by the next meeting. Lieutenant Toribio, Lieutenant Febble, your command review, do you think it will be done by Thursday, October 19th?
It may not be, sir, for the simple reason that Chief Allison, I know, is out for a few weeks. We do have an interim chief, but I don't know what you feel is most appropriate with that situation.
It's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have. I wish I could add something more to that, but I do know that Chief Allison is gone for a couple weeks. I don't exactly know when he's going to return.
I also want to make sure that we return at a time where it won't just be someone new and then have to start over. So I'm hearing that it doesn't necessarily make sense to come back on the 19th.
I don't believe so. I think maybe if we pushed it out another week, and then we can figure out what the chief's schedule is, and then also talk to Chief Beer and see if kind of he'll sit in that stead for the purposes of document review. And then if something comes up, I can push out to the group and we could adjust the date. But maybe if we look to the 26th.
Recent trends aside, I assume that we will be having a police commission meeting that evening. And I want to get off of Wednesday so that both Mariano and Commissioner Howell can come back. Okay, well, that means that I am looking at either, well, no one's going to come on the 30th or 31st for Halloween. let's just say maybe we do go the full 4 weeks and go to the 2nd, November 2nd. I know it's far out, but would like to try to get this done, and unfortunately I have some logistical realities to deal with.
Yeah, that works for me on the 2nd.
That works for me too, but just FYI, the 2nd is a Day of the Dead, I believe, according to my calendar.
Is it? Oh, good Lord, it is. Um, if we try to do the 23rd, a Monday, the 23rd, will that have enough time for Chief Allison to review? He said he's out for weeks, right? So
Yeah,
may not.
I don't know. I mean, I say we if we can come to a date, let's set it, and then as soon as we know if it's not going to work, we'll push out to the group, and then via email, I presume we can coordinate when we could move it to.
Okay. How about for the people that we have here with us today? How is Monday, October 23rd?
I have an SSOC meeting that night,
That's right, you do.
but if I'm the only one that can't go, don't hold it up just because for me.
Well, I'm I'm inclined to just try to shoot for the 2nd. To make sure to have enough time and not just like schedule it, and to have everyone here because it is going to be what is likely going to be final review. Give everyone time to get on it. Okay. Why don't I just tentatively set the 2nd, and I will just make sure I stay on the ball with you, Lieutenant Toribio, about that review.
Perfect.
Okay, November 2nd, 6 p.m. Thank you all for your hard work. Much appreciated, and for your thoughts.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night, everyone.
Night.
Have a great night.
Not just